The Senate President Warren Petersen asked the Trump administration to rescind the Department of Justice report on the Phoenix Police Department. If you're unfamiliar, first let me say this. The report is a joke, in my opinion, for a number of reasons. Not just because I'm pro-cop. I'll get into the reasons in just a second. But there is something called a consent decree, which has been entered into by many jurisdictions, in which the Department of Justice goes into an agency, they do an investigation, they come out with a report saying your agency is a disaster. It's racist, it's abusive, and you've got to change everything. And we want you to agree to a court-appointed monitor. That monitor gets to make decisions about your agency, and you can't do anything. Your police chief and command staff cannot do anything without the approval of the monitor. Oh, and by the way, you're going to spend upwards of 10, 20, Phoenix is predicted to be out $25 million a year on average. It's going to be top heavy, so more at the beginning, but over time, you're talking about, $500 million, $50 million a year possibly, that it's going to cost to pay this monitor. And he's the one or she's the one that gets to say when it ends. In other words, the faucet gets turned on, your city pays tens of millions of dollars, and then the only one that can shut that faucet off is the person that we forced you to hire. That's basically a consent decree. So the Phoenix Police Department is maintained, and I believe it to be true, even before the current chief was there, that the Phoenix Police Department is a self-assessing, self-correcting agency. When you look at the millions and millions of contacts with the public and calls for service that Phoenix responded to during the time of the investigation, the years that the investigation covered, there was such a minute, small number of cases that were even questioned. And then when you look at the places, and there's a website that Phoenix has put up, that even when you look at the cases where there was wrongdoing by a police officer or police officers, it was handled with either suspensions, firings, retraining, a combination of a couple of those things. So the Phoenix Police Department responded without the help. I'll give you one of the ridiculous things in the investigation. For me, was one of the most ridiculous. The Department of Justice said that the Phoenix Police Department mishandles calls for service in mental health situations when people are having a mental health crisis. The very same Department of Justice, under different leadership, but the Department of Justice of the United States, just a few years ago, came to Phoenix to give Phoenix an award because Phoenix was on the cutting edge of training squads of officers to handle mental health calls. You put an officer in a very bad spot. You've got to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. You send officers whose job is not being a counselor. Their job is to serve and protect the public. And you've got to protect innocent people, including yourself and your partners, but innocent people from harm. And when you go to a call and someone is having a mental health crisis and that person is waving a weapon, wielding a weapon, however you want to phrase it, you've got to engage and do something. And many times it ends violently, sometimes deadly. But how do you blame the cops for that? They're responding to a situation in front of them. It's a ridiculous report. It took about 3 years. And then they came out with things that said that they are racially biased, that they are excessively abusive to non-white interactions. So when they approach someone that's non-white, whether they are Black, Hispanic, or Native American, that they are exceptionally abusive to that group of people. And they just throw a blanket statement out there after 3 years. And when I read part of this report, and I thought, you know what? If you hired a company, if you were a business owner, and you hired a consultant to come in to assess your business, you say, if you look at how much money, the income we have coming in, it's hard for me to understand how we aren't keeping more of that money. Where is all of this money going? And they investigate your company even for a year, let's say 1 year. And at the end of the year, they say, well, you've got a guy in accounting that's been embezzling money from you. And you say, oh my gosh, when did you find that out? 2 weeks in. Well, I was here for 2 weeks and I saw this guy was stealing from you. Wouldn't you say, oh my gosh, why wouldn't you have told me that when you found it? Why did you wait until the entire report was done? And by the way, The report doesn't tell me who the guy is. So the Department of Justice report is a biased, and I would challenge anyone who disagrees with me on this to give me one example of one improvement at any agency in the country that's agreed to a consent decree. Chief Michael Sullivan, the interim chief, was brought to Arizona because he is known as an expert in dealing with these consent decrees. And so Louisville, Baltimore, Phoenix. And changes were made, but changes were made before he got here. But significant changes to the use of force policy and other things were implemented and put in place. And if you bring in someone as a monitor, you ruin all of that. You can't do anything on your own. And it costs tens of millions of dollars. By the way, you know who else is going to suffer? The Phoenix Fire Department. You know why? Because this comes out of the public safety budget. I'm a Phoenician. I'm part of the voting public that voted in favor of bond measures to expand the capabilities and the sizes and the fire stations and everything for public safety across the board. I voted in favor of that. I believe public safety, first and foremost, is what every city has to provide for its citizens. It's the primary function of local government is public safety. This comes out of the public safety budget. So it's a mess. I'm glad that the Senate president is standing up. And I hope that the Trump administration and the DOJ looks at this and says it needs to go.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Catch up on Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast, and click the button in the middle to subscribe.